Ladies and gentlemen, greetings to you all. My name is Charles Mwaila, and I'm the chairperson of the National Skills Authority. Let me start by acknowledging the presence of the following invited organizations and members, just to give you a sense of the participants joining us this morning. We have the National Skills Authority members, the Executive Officer of the National Skills Authority and the Secretariat, government representatives.
Yes.
Government representatives, sector education and training authorities, universities, South Africa, South African colleges, principals organization, technical vocational education and training colleges, Congress of South African Trade Unions, Federations of Unions of South Africa, National Council of Trade Unions, South African Youth Council, Women's National Coalition, South African National Civic Organization, Disabled People South Africa, members from Business Unity South Africa, members from Association of Private Providers of Education, Training and Development, skills experts, researchers, our speakers, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I welcome all the participants to this webinar hosted by the National Skills Authority in partnership with Mail and Guardian. The National Skills Authority is hosting part 2 of the series of webinars. The first part was held on the 29th of June 2020 under the theme COVID-19 impact on education, skills development and training. Furthermore, part 2 of the series is guided by the theme, the negative effect of COVID-19 on skills development and training in the workplace. Part 2 is intended to unpack a wide range of topics to prepare and assist stakeholders in dealing with the current new reality. The ultimate intention of these webinars is to come up with a timely, comprehensive, and appropriate policy response within the post-school education and training sector. It is evident that South Africa has been negatively affected by the knock-on effect of the COVID-19 pandemic. This pandemic continues to impact, among others, education, skills development and training, and affecting the way we work and learn in an unprecedented manner. The National Skills Authority continues to assess and monitor the situation and to ensure that the Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation is advised appropriately on emerging policy shifts. In the midst of the pandemic, we need to acknowledge the fact that technology is becoming the main driver of change across the globe. New training and career development interventions will be needed to enable people to reposition themselves and to appropriately respond to the fourth industrial revolution demands. Once again, a warm welcome to all the participants. Your active participation will be highly appreciated throughout the session. At this point, let me briefly lay some ground rules. Kindly note that everyone will be on mute to avoid background noises. Our technical team will be managing the chat functionality where you will be able to enter your questions and comments in the question box throughout the presentations. Please make good use of the question box to maximize your interaction with the speakers and their support teams. Each of the speakers is allocated 20 minutes for questions, 20 minutes for the presentation and additional 15 minutes for questions and discussion. Our lineup of speakers today is drawn from both the public and private sectors and we will also have a share of a global perspective as well. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to briefly introduce the following three speakers to you. But first, let me start by introducing the moderator for the day, Dr. Tauma Shongwane. He is the NSA Executive Officer. The first speaker is Mr. Zuki Lemvalo. He is the Deputy Director General representing the public sector from the Skills Development Branch of the Department of Higher Education and Training. His presentation will focus on the negative effects of COVID-19 on skills development and training in the workplace from a national government department's perspective. Mr. Mvalo will also deal with the launch of the ILO Apprenticeship Toolkit Guide. He will be joined by a co-speaker, Mr. Vijayan Naidu, the Chief Executive Officer for the Quality Council for Trades and Occupations. Mr. Naidu will be engaging with the participants through the chat box in response to posed questions. The second speaker is Dr. Ashwan Agarwal. He is the International Labour Organization's team leader. He specializes on work-based learning, apprenticeships, recognition of prior learning, and core work skills. His presentation will focus on the international perspective, especially on the implementation of ILO Apprenticeship Toolkit Guide in a South African context. The presentation will also cover the unique features and reasons for developing the toolkit and how practitioners will benefit from the toolkit. He's joining us from Geneva. Dr. Agarwal will also be joined by a co-speaker, Dr. Floras Prinsloo, who is a work-based learning business coach and mentor. Dr. Prinsloo will be interacting with participants through the chat box in response to posed questions. The third speaker and the last speaker will be Ms. Lynette Mento. She is the Executive for Transformation, Learning and Development, representing the business sector perspective from Balworld Group. Her presentation will focus on the impact of COVID-19 faced by businesses, especially on human resources, technology, and financial implications. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the National Skills Authority, I would like to thank you for joining us today. We hope you will find the information presented today valuable. I want to also encourage you to deliberate and make your own contributions during this webinar. At this juncture, I'm going to hand over the program to the moderator, Dr. Mashongwane, who will be facilitating the deliberations. I will come back towards the end of the program to summarize the discussions for the day. I now call upon the first speaker, Mr. Mvalo, to make his presentation. Over to you, sir. I thank you all.
Once again, Chairperson and esteemed colleagues and guests, I must really appreciate this opportunity that is accorded to us to make this presentation today. Without further ado, I'll zoom into the presentation itself with my first slide. I should think Chairperson already narrated quite very well the impact of COVID-19 in all facets of our society. We all know that the pandemic has brought about immediate and unprecedented impact regarding the way we conduct work and skills development, especially the workplace-based learning programs. The International Labour Organization makes an indication, amongst others, that 94% of the world's workers are living in countries with some sort of workplace closure measures in place, and that as at 17 May 2020, 20% of the world's workers lived in countries with the required workplace closures for all but essential workers. An additional 69% lived in countries with the required workplace closures for some sectors or categories of workers. And a further 5% lived in countries with recommended workplace closures. I should think in our context, colleagues will be quite very averse, especially when we started with a alert level 5 lockdown towards the end of March 2020. Estimates, of course, in South Africa that under alert level 5, the very core one, 40% of the workforce was working, whilst under alert level 4, 55% of the workforce was working, and under alert level 3, which is the current one, it is estimated that 71% of the workforce is working, and under alert level 2, we're estimating that about 94% of the workforce will be working, and obviously under alert level 1, 100% of the workforce will be working. So the question, therefore, that we should be asking ourselves as we gather here, what does this mean to skills development and workplace training, especially the workplace-based learning programs, which require significant portion of practical workplace experience? We also know that our universities under alert level 3 only allow a maximum of 33% of student population to return to campuses, delivery sites, and residences on conditions, of course, that they can be safely accommodated and supported in line with the health and safety protocols as directed by the department. All universities continue, of course, to support other students through remote multimodal teaching, learning and assessment strategies and plans. The same is applying in our TVET colleges. For example, NATED trimester engineering students returned as follows: N6 and N3 on the 10th of June, N5 and N2 on the 15th of June, N4 and N1 on the 22nd of June. NATED semester business studies students returned as follows: N6 on the 25th June, N5 29th June, N4 6th July. The return of the NCV students also is as follows. Your NCV level 4 returned on the 13th of July, whilst your level 3 returned on the 20th, will be returned on the 20th July, and of course under 2 on the 27th. Then that will be NCV level 2 on the 27th July. Most of the programs, of course, colleagues will know quite very well that they do require some form or the other of workplace-based learning intervention, implying then therefore that if we do not have workplaces available to host them, completing, of course, their qualifications will be delayed, by so doing delaying skills that are so required to transition into the labor market. Colleagues will be aware as well that on the 29th June 2020, the same is said about the directions that we published regarding the reopening of institutions offering qualifications registered on the occupational qualifications sub-framework, with easing lockdown as from alert level 3, of course. You'll see here that within few months since the declaration of the state of national disaster and subsequently alert levels risk-adjusted strategy, a lot has changed in the world and in South Africa regarding skills development and training in the workplace. Employers and skills development providers, whether in public or private, have been severely challenged, including individuals and workers to adapt to online modalities, what is now conventionally referred to as the new normal, The call is quite very clear to everybody to enhance his or her skills in order to be relevant. Every day or week now we are experiencing some form of closures of workplaces, also of course learning institutions, implying a massive loss in the development of human capital with significant long-term socio-economic implications, of course. We all agree that this new normal is imposing huge anxiety to all of us, but in it also is an opportunity to develop alternative methods of doing business and new teaching and learning culture. We are told, for example, in countries such as China, which was first hit by the COVID-19, is already well in advance in providing a large share of its students with access to online learning opportunities. Embracing digital learning and online collaboration will be our central feature, of course, regarding the provision going forward. There are also positive feedback regarding business adapting, especially during alert level 4 lockdown. This will be shown in the next slide. As you see on this slide, you'll see some variables that were measured here. If I take those ones with huge numbers, increased use of virtual connections externally, you'll see that 320 companies, they increased their use of virtual connections externally. That is somewhere about 14%. Increased use of virtual connections internally, you'll see there the number is 348, which will be equal to more or less 16%. And then followed by added new ways to impact with or sell customers. You'll see there, because companies are beginning now to adapt into this new normal. And then it's something that we need, of course, to embrace. And then skills development, we are called then therefore upon to intervene under these circumstances. Well, here, colleagues, you know quite very well that in South Africa, we remain having a big challenge regarding the labor market. You'll see unemployment rate, as we are aware, is quite very high at around 30.1%, implying then therefore that 7.1 million people are unemployed in South Africa, while 16.4 million are employed. Then your total workforce will be 23.5 million, your labor force, 38.9 million people of working age. Then you see there, 15.4 million, those ones who are not economically active. But then, of course, the large percentage there, you'll see that is comprising of students in the main. Here, we just trying to demonstrate, because we do have a national development plan in South Africa. You will see, for example, there, 30.1%, that is the current unemployment rate in the country. 14% there is what, the national development plan sought to achieve, to say we must have reduced the unemployment by 14% in 2020. You could see then the deficit there is already 16.1%. We should have been at 14% there. By 2030, you'll see we should reduce unemployment to 6% by 2030. And you see the deficit there is quite very huge at 24.1%. Then if we look into the next slide, we'll be looking into young people, because we all agree that the challenge, not only in South Africa, but also international, is among young people. The top one there is those who are between the ages of 15 and 24. And you could see the ascendance, there, up to 59%. Somewhere in 2015, during the same quarter, you'll see that unemployment for young people between the ages of 15 and 24 was 50.3%. And now you can say 5 years thereafter, unemployment for young people between the ages of 15 and 24 is standing at 59%. So this is the huge challenge, that is facing the country. You could see others from 25 to 34 is not that much. But then obviously, this is also quite very huge if we are having such young people who are unemployed in the country. Here, colleagues will know quite very well, especially the social partners that were being involved, in the process of developing the National Skills Development Plan, which was published on the 7th March 2019. So from where we are seated, we strongly believe that the National Skills Development Plan is quite very relevant to our conditions. You'll see, for example, your number one there on top is one of the outcomes. That outcomes is saying identifying and increasing production of occupations in high demand. So it means then, therefore, even under COVID-19, we should be able to identify and increase production of occupations in high demand. The department obviously currently is involved with that process. We are developing currently about 3 lists. One is occupations in high demand. The second one is a priority skills list, and then the other one is critical skills list. You see, there very important, of course, is the linking of education and the workplace. That remains very important, especially if you look into some of the topics of today, apprenticeships, your learnerships, your work integrated learning, and so on. That is outcome number 2 in terms of the National Skills Development Plan, which is quite very relevant to us. Number 3, improving the level of skills in the South African workforce. As you think colleagues would agree with me when I'm saying, especially during and post-COVID, we need to do a lot in terms of improving the level of skills in the South African workforce. Increasing access to occupational directed programs, well, that's quite very important for all of us because we need more artisans, especially that the government is also speaking of, infrastructure development as part of the recovery plan of the economy. Support the growth of the public college system. Well, it's quite very obvious, colleagues, because if you need artisans, you can only be able to produce them if you are having a strong public college system. Skills development support for entrepreneurship and cooperative development, that I should think we know quite very well. If you look into the National Development Plan, it's saying to us that mostly, more employment can only be created if we are assisting in the area of entrepreneurship as well as cooperative development. In fact, the National Development Plan is saying the majority of those who will be employed from now to 2030 will be coming from this particular area. Encourage and support worker-initiated training. As you think, will agree with me as well here, because especially, in your COVID and post-COVID, we need to ensure that, we are training, especially, our trade union movement and so on, because they are quite very central in this process. Well, number 8, the last one, colleagues, obviously support career development services. Well, you'll agree with me, because once you are having your list of occupations in high demand, your critical skills list, your priority skills list, then it means then, therefore, you must advance your support for career development services, quite very critical. What then was saying, what is obvious in our context, if we are to address challenges imposed unto us by COVID-19 pandemic in any way, because a crisis before crisis. And we know in South Africa, we've had this crisis even before COVID-19. So COVID-19 has just come to expose our fault lines in terms of our intervention. So we need then, therefore, to accelerate your workplace-based learning programs. Well, I'm an advocate of learnerships and quality apprenticeships because I know the absorption rate of those learning programs is quite very high. Work integrated learning and internships, of course, colleagues, I've mentioned earlier on that, if young people who are in our institutions, whether universities or colleges, have to complete their qualifications, they need work integrated learning. We know that these learning interventions, as I've mentioned, have high absorption rate, especially learnerships and apprenticeships. Precisely so because are designed with the participation of important stakeholders, especially the employers and other social partners, of course. We know already the department has conducted an employment index, for artisans. In 2018-19, those who were found competent were 19,627. You'll see that if you look there, the absorption rate was 81%, of which you minus 3%, which is self-employment there. Also, we've just received another report from Rhodes University working with a bank sector, whereupon is telling us that if the percentages of completers in WPL programs in self-employment and employment are added together, the result is an employment rate of roughly 80%. These surveys, colleagues, are also obviously supporting the work that was done some years ago by the Human Sciences Research Council. Very important, as we're saying, we are now currently under alert level 3. We've just conducted a survey as the department through sitters. You'll see the provisional results, which are indicating that under alert level 3, 56% of apprentices are returning to workplaces, 56%, followed by 31% of those who are doing internships, who are also returning into workplaces. 27%, those who are doing learnerships, are also returning to workplaces. 17% TVET graduate learners are returning to workplaces, and 19% of university learners are returning to workplaces. Obviously, this is a big challenge, colleagues. We would wish to have 100%, but then we know the impact, of COVID-19. That is why we are having this poor return rate of learners into workplaces. So hence then, therefore, we're calling upon to employers to ensure that we are prioritizing as well workplace training. We'll be doing another survey later, maybe in August or September, so that we can see as to what are the trends. Sorry, by that time, we might be under alert level 2, but then even if we are under alert level 3, we're still going to do the next survey just to check as to how many learners who are returning into workplaces. Well, I'm getting to another very important area, colleagues. We said today we are officially launching International Labour Organization Toolkit for Quality Apprenticeship. The ILO has developed, as it was also mentioned earlier, a 2-volume toolkit for quality apprenticeship. Volume 1 is aimed at assisting policymakers in developing systems, whilst Volume 2 is a guide for practitioners for developing, implementing, monitoring, and evaluating apprenticeship programs. A practitioner in this instance is described as a person who plays a role in the design, planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of apprenticeship programs. It's very important to know as to who will use the toolkit. Then you'll see them. What we are saying is that Volume 2 is a resource aimed at supporting practitioners, those who have a role in the design, planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of an apprenticeship program. So the audience then therefore includes, amongst others, the following: trainers, mentors, supervisors, and human resource officers in enterprise, managers and teachers of private colleges or providers, employment services providers, and school counselors, labor inspectors, and experts and staff, other institutions involved in the development of standards, qualifications, curricula, and learning aids, examinations, and certification monitoring and evaluation of apprenticeship program. Well, I've already made an indication regarding the importance of artisans and addressing socio-economic challenges of the country. The National Skills Development Plan, which I've alluded to it earlier, seeks to ensure that South Africa has adequate, appropriate, and high-quality skills that contribute towards economic growth, employment creation, and social development. The NSDP is deriving its mandate from the broader plan of government, of course, the National Development Plan, which sets a target to produce 30,000 artisans per annum by 2030. I can of course indicate to colleagues that for this financial year, that's ended 31st March 2020, we have produced 24,049 artisans, meaning we stand therefore we are quite very closer into this target of 30,000 artisans per annum by 2030. But I must make an indication, we've already revised down our targets for 2020 and 2021 due to COVID pandemic. Many enterprises may not have the capacity or willingness to offer apprentices, and the lack of apprenticeship opportunities is one of the main challenges facing artisan learners. This means that while a young person may achieve a suitable qualification at a TVET college, he or she may subsequently discover that they cannot obtain the necessary work experience to enable them to take a trade test. To overcome then this big challenge, the ILO toolkit offers practitioners practical solutions suited to conditions in different countries, including South Africa. The Apprenticeship Toolkit Guide provides a comprehensive, concise information and examples of good practice and practical tools. We shall then, therefore, colleagues, be playing a video that is not going to be that long, more or less a minute or so. Sean, you'll assist us, eh?
Apprenticeships have played a central role in lowering youth unemployment, enhancing the productivity and competitiveness of enterprises, and developing skills that are relevant to a rapidly changing world of work. Yet many countries face challenges in scaling up and sustaining apprenticeship programs and are increasingly seeking advice from the ILO. To meet this need, the ILO has developed an innovative 2-volume toolkit for quality apprenticeships. Volume 2 provides a comprehensive, practical guide for practitioners, presents over 125 tools, including examples of good practices from more than 40 countries at different stages of economic development, development agencies, and the experience of the ILO. It also highlights recent innovations and emerging trends in apprenticeships, in particular demonstrating how technology can enhance the effectiveness and efficiency of apprenticeship programs and how apprenticeships can bridge the skills gap in the digital economy. The ILO Toolkit for Quality Apprenticeships, your guide to better preparing apprentices for a changing world of work. It also highlights recent innovations and emerging trends in apprenticeships, in particular demonstrating how technology can enhance the effectiveness and efficiency of apprenticeship programs and how apprenticeships can bridge the skills gap in the digital economy.
Well, what I'm not sure, colleagues, is as to whether it is audible. Sean, from your side, is it audible? And colleagues here?
Yes, Mr. Muvalo, it was quite audible. Thank you.
Okay, thanks then very much, colleagues. That's where my presentation ends. Then I will hand over to Dr. Mashongwa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mvalo, for doing us the honors of presenting, particularly from the side of government in terms of the effect of COVID-19 on the workplace, and also at the request of International Labour Organization launching this toolkit guide for apprentices. Now, this is something which is very welcomed, because it is not just a toolkit for South Africa, but for the entire world. I mean, any country that would want to make use of the toolkit. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning once again. Let me, as I open up for questions, maybe start by saying today we're having two male presenters and one female. The first part, we had two female presenters and one male. I'm saying this because indeed we still have a long way to go in terms of gender balancing, but I'm simply saying for those who might have missed the first webinar, we had two female presenters. We hope that in future at one stage we'll have more of the female presenters, obviously, and more so we are looking forward also for representation of other constituencies in the NSA, the social partners, as Mr. Mvalo was saying. Per se, the whole idea was not necessarily for us to create a platform where we create a debate, but so as we then gain knowledge. Now, if a presenter comes from, for an example, Women's National Coalition as a constituency of the NSA, it will be mostly welcome. But then if that presenter comes from youth or even from people, disability people of South Africa, or even organized labor, this is what we are looking forward to. And I must actually say, you know, our organized labor has actually been representing us very well in an international platform, the ILO and so forth. They have actually, on the number of occasions, been representing us there. So without any waste of time, I'm going to be opening up for the chat box. And we have our two co-presenters. It is for the first time that we have co-presenters. Unfortunately, they are not in a position to show face, as our platform does not allow that. But these are experts in their own rights, and therefore they are going to be making comments, additions, as well as responding to the questions in the chat box. So let's see the questions that we have. And maybe Mr. Mvalo, you might have also picked on some of the questions in the chat box. The first one is, it says, good day, we are in the jewelry sector, which requires actual work experience. We sent DHET an email to explain this and need to know if we can be allowed to have the learners returned in the shift program in order for them to all continue training. Now, our expert, Mr. Naidu, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Quality Council for Trades and Occupation, responded to that and said the direction issued by the minister allows for learners to return, but within the existing regulations and social distancing, and the 33% as one of the measures. Now, Mr. Mvalo, you might want to add to that particular response of Mr. Naidu or expand on it. The other question says, while it is prudent to adopt digital methods, this will take time to set up and implement and will impact on 2020 target planning. How is this being addressed between the Skill Development Act and the BBEE Commission? Let me then go for the last questions, Mr. Mvalo, to give you an opportunity. Embracing digitization, the pandemic necessitates new interventions. What strategies has the department put in place in order to implement few and impactful priorities that can be measured in the near future? Mr. Mvalo, you can respond, as well as Mr. Naidu, who's also assisting us with the response and comments in the chat box. Mr. Mvalo, you are on mute. You are on mute, Mr. Mvalo.
Is that in order now? Am I audible now, Doc?
You are. You are.
Oh yes. Then I was saying, I should think colleagues, especially in the jewelry sector, will, get reminded that on the 29th of June, we published, these directions. And then it was for the first time that we had to publish directions which are applicable in particular to skills development providers out there, because you realize that mostly those that we have been publishing were in the area of public sector, in TVET colleges and universities. Then if colleagues, they do not have that copy, I should think we can be able to provide them the copy of the government gazette that we published on the 29th of June 2020, which in fact is opening up, training, whether in workplace or by skills development providers. The area of digital training, if we look, when I went through the outcomes of the National Skills Development Plan, the very first one, it was the identification and increasing production of occupations that are high in demand. So it doesn't matter which sector, those occupations that are in high demand, whether it's in the digital economy or in any other sector, economic sector. So that is quite very relevant to us. We do have then, therefore, the National Skills Development Plan. And I must also mention that we are also busy currently with the 3 lists, that is your priority skills list, as well as critical skills list and occupations in high demand. So those lists that we are analyzing right now will be able to tell us as to which occupations that are in high demand, especially during COVID and post-COVID. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. What is very interesting is in the chat box, if one looks into the chat box, the good thing is people are not only asking questions. I can see some of our legends in skills development who are actually providing comments. Indeed, one of our experts, Dr. Prinsloo, is making very valuable comments, and you see the comrades from organized labor, Datin Tlapo and Bume Conti. Please continue with those comments and in the chat box. Let me then go for other questions here. The other one says, corporate South Africa may not be able to provide opportunity for all our unemployed, especially the youth. Where does the department see the opportunity to develop skills that can create employment opportunities? And the next one is skills development support for entrepreneurship and cooperative development. How is this going to be accelerated or achieved during the period of COVID-19? And if I may, also add Mekonti's question there to say, what do you see as the strategy for the youth during this very difficult time of COVID-19? Shall we take these 3 questions? I know there are many more questions. Time will not necessarily permit that we go through all of the questions, but the good thing is you having our experts who are also responding to some of the questions. Should we fail to deal with all of them at a later stage, once we have time, we will then come back to those questions. Mr. Mvalo?
Well, Chairperson, I agree, with a colleague who's saying, we do have this challenge of corporate, in South Africa, because you'll see my earlier slides. I'll also make an indication of those who are returning into workplace-based learning programs. So it means then, therefore, within your risk-adjusted alert levels, it's going to be difficult for the corporate world out there, because we can see that amongst others, the priority, of course, is going to maximize profit, by so doing, returning to workplaces, only employees. So we're making this call to say to employers out there, let's open up, our workplaces, especially for the young learners to go to their workplaces. We know already, as I've mentioned, youth unemployment is quite very high in South Africa. So we need then, therefore, to assist each other in terms of opening up, workplaces. I indicated as well earlier that if you look into the rate, the absorption rate, of those who have done learnerships, those who have done apprenticeships, are quite very high, because there you work closely with the employers themselves. In fact, if you go back to the National Skills Authority study that was done for the period 2011-2016, so that study is telling us some good news, especially regarding, this workplace-based training. That 80% of the employers who were surveyed, they said there is increase in productivity in the workplace, meaning which then, therefore, these young learners, when they are there, they are also contributing to productivity in the workplace. They said 73.3% of these learners, in workplaces, the employers, 73.3%, they said they've seen now the decrease in errors, whilst about 74.8%, they said, there is increase in terms of the work readiness, of which we can attest, and then that is what I also indicated in our presentation. I must also mention, because the issue of young people, we know if you go back to that same study of the National Skills Authority for 2011-2016, is telling us the beneficiaries overwhelmingly were young people. About 76% of those who benefited in those interventions were young people below the ages of 35. So then that is why then, therefore, if you go again, you look into the National Skills Development Plan, you'll see there that we have migrated, part of important, variables in the National Skills Development Strategy 3, your transformational and developmental imperatives, addressing issues of gender, addressing issues of race, addressing issues of class, addressing issues of geography, addressing issues of youth. So that is central, in the National Skills Development Plan. So therefore, as we'll be monitoring quite very closely the work that is being done, especially by SITAs, we'll be able to take into these transformational imperatives as to whether there is a compliance, because they are quite very important for us, especially if we are going to address the question of youth unemployment that continues to ratchet, that continues to rocket in South Africa. We can only, especially as skills development providers, intervene by training young people, involving them in those programs that we know already that they do have a significant impact. Obviously, colleagues, that is why if also you look into the outcomes, of the National Skills Development Plan, you'll find that also the issue of small, medium, and micro enterprises is being emphasized. Already the minister, when he had this session with the SITAs, that was early in June, he impressed upon to the SITAs to say, as we are busy, we are within this pandemic, let's make it a point, for example, goods and services, that are being procured in this process, are procured in the main from your small, medium, and micro enterprises. But then we're not only saying, we're making opportunities for your small, medium, and micro enterprises. We're saying to them, they must open up as well at their workplaces. They must absorb young people, they must absorb female, they must absorb people with disabilities, so that we can address this socio-economic challenge that is facing South Africa, and I know is facing the global world as well. Thanks very much, Percy.
Thank you very much. That was our own DDG from Department for Higher Education and Training. Very, very eloquent in terms of issues relating to skills development and the challenges that the country is facing. So at this stage, I know that we have you would have loved to to have him for some additional minutes, so as he can elaborate some more. But given time constraint, I'm going to request that we move to our next speaker. He is our international guest today, Dr. Ashwani Agrawal. You may know him. He once worked in South Africa, responsible for the Southern African region, still working for ILO. And he is quite, keen on ensuring that we develop capacities of people and in particular skills related to apprenticeship. So, Dr. Ashwani, over to you. You are actually our second international guest after Nazrin Mani in our last webinar, who was also connecting from Switzerland. You're welcome, and you have those minutes to take us through your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, moderator, Dr. Thabang Mashongane, chairperson, fellow panelists, participants. It's my honor to be with you, and I like to express special thanks to DDG, Mr. Movelo, on behalf of DHET to launch the toolkit for quality apprenticeship for practitioners, and also for giving me an opportunity to go in more details to explain what this toolkit is about, why it was developed, and how it will benefit practitioners in South Africa. Before I start the presentation, let me just share some thoughts with you. Now, I was in Africa for 9 years, based in South Africa, but looking after first all Southern and Eastern Africa, but then later on whole Africa also. And besides Africa, I have worked in Asia and Americas and Europe, and more than 50 countries I have served so far. It's my privilege. Wherever I go, the first question nowadays where the policymakers and practitioners ask, they say, please share the examples from a country which is similar in status from us. If we are emerging economy, can you share how another emerging economies are successfully overcoming such challenges which are existing in their system? Or if they are from the developing countries, how other developing countries are addressing those ones? Because sometimes they feel that, yes, examples from the developed countries are very good, but many times they are not very, very conducive or suitable for their conditions. And often you also here must be hearing also at the country level, people say, we are very good in developing policies. We have excellent policies, but our implementation of policy is not good. We are rather sometimes they say we are poor in implementation of the policies. And one of the and this toolkit is linked to that one. While the volume 1 was for the policymaker, how they can develop effective policies, but then we thought it's not sufficient. How to assist policymaker and practitioners in implementing those policies. And then the volume 2 come. Volume 2 is for the practitioners, how they can implement the policies, how can they design and implement the program. And to be frank, I will tell you, this was one of the most difficult projects. You will agree that developing a document which gives policy recommendation is easier. We all know it is easy to say employers should be engaged, workers should be engaged, social partners should be engaged in the process. But then question is how they can be engaged effectively. It always says align curricula with the labor market needs, but the question comes how to do it. So that's why this toolkit 2 is about addressing all those challenges. So that's why it is also difficult. It took time to prepare it, not only because for preparing, but also to collect examples from all over the world to demonstrate this one. With this one, I will request, maybe if I had to present myself, I think I'll go to the presentation now. So with this one, I'll start the presentation. I will take less time, and so that we can have more time to chat together. And again, I will request that as we are discussing, this platform is very good platform where you can post continuously the questions on this platform. So please continue to post your questions, comments, so that we can, after the presentation, we continue to have the discussion. So primarily this presentation, I will focus on why this toolkit was developed and how it will benefit practitioners, particularly from those from South Africa. And also during the process, I will cover what are the unique special features of this toolkit, why this toolkit is so special than which doesn't exist in other the publications. And also a little bit discussion on the training life cycle tools and how practitioners can use it. Also, just to let you know, there is a button, I've been told, files on the right hand side. And if you click there, from there, you can also download this publication. So first, let's start with the first point, why and for whom this toolkit is developed. I'll just refer to just now the DD Mr. Muwalo mentioned also, and he gave excellent examples from South Africa, how apprenticeship is benefiting South Africa young persons in terms of his quoting figures. Also around 80% of the graduates are getting the employment. How, and he also mentioned, I think, about 80% increase in the productivity. So all those benefits we all know, but at the same time, most countries are also facing challenge in establishing and sustaining good quality apprenticeship. Most important question always asked is that we have large population, we have large number of young persons as well as adults now who wants to have opportunity for young apprenticeships, but we do not have either the sufficient number of enterprises, or enterprises are reluctant to offer apprenticeship. They feel they are not having the capacity. So this toolkit also addresses those things also. How apprenticeships capacity can be addressed, how more and more enterprises can offer apprenticeships. So as I just mentioned in my introductory remark, we started with volume 1, and now we have launched the volume 2. So this presentation, I will focus on the volume 2, not on the volume 1. So let's see, I think Mr. Muwalo already mentioned who are the practitioners, but just broadly I will say, any person who has a role in the design, planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of an apprenticeship program. More or less broadly, we call them as practitioners. So, so this toolkit has various, is modular in nature, and various modules will be applicable to different type of practitioners which are listed here, whether they are trainers in enterprises, whether they are teachers in the TVET colleges, whether it's employment services or school counselors, labor inspectors, or curricular developers in the QCTO, or whether you say in the Indalala or National Artisan Moderation Body, whether those examiners, assessors are there. So there is for everyone, there is some kind of a like module is there which meets their requirement. So this is broadly what I just mentioned, that broadly how you can say in the context of South Africa, for which type of organizations and stakeholders volume 1 is applicable, or for which type of stakeholders volume 2 is applicable. But at the same time, I will say it's not a very watertight compartment, because many of the features of the volume 1 are applicable for practitioners, because practitioners also have to understand what is a policy environment. Similarly, policymakers also need to understand many aspects of the toolkit 2, so that they develop appropriate policies. So in a way, many of the things will be useful for all type of persons in the skills development system. So let's see, we are seeing how is exactly the salient features of this toolkit and how it will benefit the practitioners. So as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we have done a great amount of spent time and energy in collecting good practices, tools from various countries around the world, so that it represents, so that everyone can find a tool which relates to their requirement. So I'll not go into more details of this one. We condition, this is just to explain the example is just to explain the condition that how the situations differ from one country to another country. For example, in one country, chambers are very strong. They can take up the role. But in another country, chambers may not have the capacity, or they may not be existing also. So this toolkit doesn't say only there's only one method, that only if you must have the chambers, so that only you can implement the apprenticeship program. It offers other options also. In countries, if you do not have the chambers, what could be the alternatives? What are the options? How can you still implement good quality apprenticeships? So I'll just, this is again what I mentioned in my opening remark, is about what could be the alternative approaches, examples, and it is tailor-made for both developed and developing countries, this toolkit particularly. And then it also has suggests a apprenticeship training life cycle, having 4 broad stages, and illustrates a step-by-step approach, how a practitioner can use step-by-step approach in executing a particular process, in executing a particular, if you, for example, if a practitioner has to understand how to anticipate skills need before going to develop the standards and the curricula. So there are good tools are available, and a step-by-step approach explained, which a practitioner can follow. So here, if you see this particular slide, it shows on an average, we have taken tools from more than 40 countries in this toolkit. And there are 125 tools. Initially, we had lot number of tools, but then we carefully selected those tools so that it is applicable for everyone's condition. And you, from this picture, you can see this has tools from South Africa also. And in case of Africa, you see it has tools from Ghana, from Kenya, Tanzania, Egypt, Morocco. Similarly, from every continent, the tools are there. So you can get a very much your country flavor, you get regional flavor, you can get also the international flavor from this toolkit. And this pie chart shows you also that how many percentage of countries are in this toolkit are represented in this toolkit. If you see, the highest are from Asia and Pacific, 35%. Europe and Central Asia together is 33%. Africa 13%. Americas 15%, and also from other Arab states also. So everyone is represented here in this toolkit. And again, it's not only high income countries. If you see, total of middle income countries is around 45%, which is more than the high income country, 43%. So you have high income country, upper middle income country, lower income country, even the low income countries also. Some examples are there to show that how those countries, good practices are there, how they are using, what type of tools are successfully they are using. So one can get very large variety of examples. And then again, this slide shows it's not only the countries. We have taken great care, because ILO is one of the important development partners, but then there are other development partners who are working on this field. So we have also looked into their work also, and taken some good tools and practices from their their work. For example, if you see, GIZ is working with South Africa closely. British Council was working last year here. So many of the organizations you can recognize, OECD, but then there are large number of organizations here. So we have taken examples, we have consulted them in this process of the toolkit, design and development of the toolkit also. So it is this toolkit represents a combined knowledge and expertise from large number of countries as well as development partners. And then, of course, when we were developing and when we finished this toolkit, COVID-19 was not there. We finished actually the working on this toolkit by November last year. But then even by that time, we gave a lot of emphasis on digital technology and innovations, that how technology is being used to enhance the effectiveness and efficiency of apprenticeships. And we have given, in fact, it took us a lot of time and efforts to select very good examples. And this toolkit has an excellent example how digital technology can be used to design and deliver apprenticeship programs. And now, in the context of COVID-19, its importance has significantly increased. So many of the questions will be how digital technology or online learning can be used. Many of those examples are part of the examples are given in this toolkit. You'll find very, very useful to them in your context also. Then also, there's an emerging new trend is also happening. For example, traditionally apprenticeship was considered as for manual occupations or engineering kind of occupations. For example, construction, manufacturing, auto. But now it's surprising, very, very surprising to see that apprenticeships are being used now for producing digital skills. As the digital economy is growing, there's a large skills gap, including, I think, in the South Africa. I'm sure South Africa also has a huge skills gap in the IT sector, ICT sector. So now many universities are adapting apprenticeship programs to deliver, together with the companies, latest skills needs of digital economy. For example, you will be surprised. For example, Singapore has a apprenticeship program for artificial intelligence. Many people will not believe that. People think apprenticeship is only for plumbing, carpenter, or like this one. No, it's not that way. So they have a special program on apprenticeship for artificial intelligence. So similarly, a lot of programs are now starting on cyber security, data analytics. So many of the latest skills, digital skills, their programs are coming up, which clearly shows apprenticeship is the most important factor in bridging the skills gap. As particularly the labor market is changing very, very fast. Their skills needs are changing fast. We all know that universities or TVET colleges will have a challenge in catching up with them, because there's always a time lag before they can revise their curricula, strengthen the capacity of trainers, and they start delivering. Whereas on the apprenticeship, the workplaces are already ready with the latest technology and equipment. So that's why by inherent, apprenticeship is much more suitable. So let's go to what is basically apprenticeship life cycle. I think you will see it's a simple one. So basically, we have divided the whole process of apprenticeship program into 4 stages, starting with developing apprenticeship program, then preparing quality training places, both, for example, how to ensure that workplaces have the quality, can provide quality training. Similarly, TVET colleges, how they can offer quality training and coordinate very well with the enterprises together. Next one is like organizing training, which is about implementing training. And then finally, not just after leaving graduates after the completion of the program, but even, for example, 80% of the graduates are getting jobs. What about the remaining 20%? So we have to assist them, everyone, so that there is a 100% transition to the employment. So each of these stages, I'll show one of the stage. Each of the stages has further processes. For example, if you see, I'm showing you the first stage, developing apprenticeship program. It has 4 processes. First is how to set up an institutional framework for social dialogue for the program level, then how to identify skills need, then how to develop occupational profiles and curricula, and providing instructional and learning materials. So now all of the participants are from various, they are all experts who are in this webinar. They are from various institutions, organizations having different responsibility. I'm sure many of you can immediately connect yourself with one of these processes where you have your job nature requires you to be primarily responsible. It doesn't mean you will not be responsible for other issues, but where your primary responsibility lies. So you can always see, and I will show later also, we are done in a very, very modular pattern, which is easier to work on this one. So I will show now how it is each process is covered. For them, in each process, we have 4-step process. First, we have described why this process is important. Why, for example, skills need anticipation. Why you need to do skills need anticipation. Then second is when we are saying standardized tool, it means what is a generic process, step-by-step approach, what each country can, a practitioner can do to do skills need anticipation. And then, for example, the next step is we have given tips and good practice examples from lessons learned from various countries, that how they can do it more when they are doing this process, what care, precautions they have to keep in mind so that they are successful. And then the fourth stage is the basically actual examples of the tools from various countries, so which can be used. Now here I will say a specific one. Each country has a unique condition, so it doesn't mean every tool will be applicable for their condition. For example, in a particular process, your country has an excellent tool already, so there's no need for you to go for another tool. But if you see you don't have a very good tool on that one, and then if for each process we are given multiple examples, so then you have to see which particular tool and the conditions from which country it is coming, whether those countries' systems, processes are having similarity to you. So which tool could you think could be more suitable to you? Of course, there may be need in many cases to still adapt that tool to your conditions. It may not be 100% that very few cases, it could be simply you can start using that toolkit, but in many cases you have to adapt to your own local condition, but it's quite possible. Then at the end of each module, we are given a checklist or benchmark to enable you to understand how your country's processes match with the international benchmarks or best practices. And then we are given special care to identify some good videos or learning materials. So these are the symbols which are given. The symbols, wherever this kind of a thing comes in the toolkit, you'll find those symbols are also given. Now I'll go faster. So I just basically explained, of course, already what is a tool. For example, we have a mobile logbook. So instead of a paper-based logbook, we are given an example from a country which are using now mobile logbooks, so that when a apprentice at the end of the day or another week, when it enters what he or she has done that work today or in the week, it is accessible immediately to the trainer in the company and also the teacher in the TVET college, so that they all continuously see in a harmonized manner what is the progress, what work an apprentice is doing. So then there are many examples of such tools are there. Now I was saying that is in the download one, perhaps it is a single PDF document, but we will share with you a link where you can download each of these. These are all basically 7 booklets are there. So each of these booklet you can download as a separate booklet also and keep it with you. If you are, for example, I'm just showing here an example. This is for one of the booklet on developing quality apprenticeship program. If your role is connected only with the developing program, so then you can keep a very small booklet, which is around 30-page booklet or something. So you don't need to all the time carry a big book with you. So that's why it is very friendly in the design feature also. And of course, this video you have already seen, and thanks to Mr. Muvalo for running the video. And with this one, I will say thank you to Soya Bonana, Sia Bonga, to all of you. Now let's see what other, if you have questions and queries, will be very pleased to answer. But at the same time, before going to questions, I will just say another one more, take another 1 minute. Just to say that I know most of you must be knowing that we are also running this massive online program on quality apprenticeship. That is again to say it's purely based on the Toolkit Volume 1 and Toolkit 2. It has 2 pathways for policymaker and practitioner, and we are very thankful to a large number of participants from South Africa who are participating and very, very effectively contributing in the various forums. I will request you, all of you, to be more proactive in the forums and webinars. And now on 6th of this next month, we are going to have a very special webinar only for South Africa context. So far, the webinars we conducted for bringing the panelists from different parts of the world, but this time it will be purely focused on the South African context. And we will request all of you to participate more and more on that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Ashwani. Thanks for the toolkit. I mean, many of us can even wonder to say why, when we discuss the issues of the negative effect of COVID-19 on skill development and training in the workplace, why then feature the toolkit? I mean, as per, their request from ILO, we then realized that during the downtime of the economy, when industries and businesses are actually not doing much, it could also be an opportune time to introduce a toolkit guide that could then say to the employers and the business people, it is a time where you can then begin to develop your own skills. Whereas when the economy gets growing and we are in a position to then offer, and we are not going to be saying we run short of skills and we have to import skills. So we then have skilled people. I like what Ashwani emphasized, because within our South African context, each time we're talking apprentices, we're talking trade related. Now, apprenticeships is not only about trade related, it's across all kinds of careers and so forth. So it's used in broad sense in this toolkit guide. So in our instances, we may even think that the toolkit could then be saving or assisting us when we develop our own learnerships and so forth, because learnerships could be one form of an apprenticeship. So I think we really need to understand the apprenticeship in this sense, in a very broad sense. I have noted a number of comments. Thanks for Dr. Prinsloo and other colleagues there, Vijay, for responding to a number of questions in regard to the toolkit. In terms of downloading the toolkit, he has already mentioned, as Ashwani to say, under your files, if you click there, you are able to download all presentations and all the links. Otherwise, if you fail to do so, from the office, we will also be sending out these presentations. We'll also upload them in our website. Okay, at this point, let's just take one round of questions because we are actually trying to catch up on our time. There is the question that said, how do we access the toolkit in our different countries? Has the toolkit been disseminated? So remember, in this platform, we're having other people who are logging in from other countries, so it's not only us South Africans. So I guess that question Ashwani will then assist us with. And how can apprenticeship be used as a means of addressing the growing demand for digital skills? I also noted that as you were presenting, you touched on that particular matter, but also Dr. Prinsloo is saying we need occupational qualifications for digital skills with apprenticeships to deliver them. Microsoft needs to come on board and share their apprenticeship model with South Africans. So he went on to say there should then be some kind of collaboration with the DHET and other related entities to ensure that this toolkit is taken forward. All right, there is another question here, which says, how will the toolkit guide assist identify skills needs in sectors and occupations? Now, Ashwani, I'm not sure whether you have also, might have noted one or two questions. I have posted about 3 questions. Can you then respond to those questions? But thanks to Dr. Prinsloo, Vijay, for responding to a number of questions. We'll continue with such engagements. And given our limited time, we will simply take this one round of questions and move to the next speaker. Thanks, Ashwani.
Thank you, Dr. Thabo Mashongane. I will answer to all those three questions. Basically, if you see, this toolkit is available for all countries, and we are very, why this launch is important, because then it informs the country practitioners that there's such a thing is available. But of course, we will be, if you are if participants from other countries are there, and if they similarly through a webinar wants to launch it, we'll be welcoming them, we'll be joining them also, explaining how it can benefit specifically their country also. And if there are specific requests how we can assist them, we'll be very willing to assist them. What I will do, we'll also share, it also reminds me, which I also forgot to mention, we have done another thing. It's not only paper copies which are available. We have done, one is complete, one single PDF. We have done each module PDF, but then we have created a website, which is an online website, so that you don't need a paper copy. You can go to the website and you can browse topic by topic very easily. So it's not a PDF document that you have to read the whole in one in the website. You can go like the menu driven system is there. You can click on each particular one topic and you can read the whole topic, and that will be more like a dynamic website. So suppose tomorrow from South Africa we come to know from the if you say that for this particular area we have a very good tool which can be useful for maybe even the other practitioners in South Africa may not be knowing, or other country may not be knowing. And if you think that you want to popularize that tool to other country, we will examine that tool, and if we've also found that this tool could be useful for other country. Now on the online website, we have made a provision. We can continuously update. We can continuously add new tools. We can continuously add new practices. We can continuously add any new type of like a video or example from there. So we'll request all of you taking this opportunity to share any kind of a new something which you think could be very useful for other countries. This is my first response to your question. Second is that how digital skills it can contribute. I already explained, and one of the slide was there. And we are also coming up with a separate publication which is on apprenticeship for the higher education and university level, degree level apprenticeships. That is more like a both mix of that one, how only for apprenticeship higher level, but also because many of the skills in the digital economy are at the higher level of qualification. So that also will meet the need. So we can look into that one also. Plus in the toolkit, there is a module on innovation and strategies for quality apprenticeship. Within that, there is a section exclusively how apprenticeship can meet the digital skills need. And there are a lot of examples are there. Please look into that one. The third question was how you can do the skills need anticipation in the sector level. So as I mentioned specifically, we have in this one developing apprenticeship quality apprenticeship program. The second section, which is called section 2.2, its section's name is identifying skills need in sectors and occupations. So that exactly what you are asking. So we have given a generic tool also, and we have given some specific example from tools. So how can it can be done? So you can use those tools very successfully to basically use this one. So with this, I think I have answered the three particular questions, but if there are any particular more questions, whether the time permits, I can answer. Otherwise, if you, I know Dr. Flores is already answering. If you have any other question, we can email to me. I can answer that one also.
Thank you very much, Ashwani, for responding to those questions, and thanks to the colleagues in the chat box who are continuing to engage and also responding to various questions. Let's then welcome our last speaker, Ms. Lynette Mento, the Executive for Transformation, Learning and Skills Development from Balo World Group. The presentation will obviously be focusing on the impact of COVID-19 as faced by businesses. particularly the downstream impact, the skills development element of the BBBE scorecard, and the case studies, and the small employer versus a large employer. So as we get to understand the effect of COVID-19 on skills development and training. Melinette, over to you.
Good morning, and thank you, Dr. Mashongwane, for this opportunity. Good morning also to the fellow panelists, to all the constituents of the NSA, to members of the public, all protocols observed. It's my pleasure today to present to you on particularly a very much a business perspective. I start off by saying that businesses have been impacted on a continuum, and this continuum is very much from a complete standstill to operations still continuing as normal. And Mr. Mvalo spoke in detail about the various levels and what happened in those levels. So I'm not going to repeat that, but what I want to emphasize here is how it has impacted employers from a skills development perspective. So on the continuum of traditional, and the one end to the left of the slide, we are used to, in a traditional context, saying that we do face-to-face interventions in a classroom, and therefore it was very difficult to continue with a traditional classroom based on the various levels of lockdown. All the way to the other end of the continuum, where we have well-adapted employers whose business is very much digital, who could continue with their skills development interventions even under lockdown. So there's on the one end traditional, on the other end very, very well-adapted, knowledge-based kind of sectors. A knowledge-based training could continue even during lockdown. For technical training, which requires access to tools, simulators, and equipment and such, pretty much came to a halt and started resuming then as the levels decreased. So when I look at the impact of COVID for businesses, I'm going to look at it specifically from a technology point of view, the financial impact, and then the people or talent impact, as we like to refer to in business. So the first issue under technology is really the issue around accessibility. So not all employees in companies necessarily have the access for laptops and tablets. Most employees have access with mobile devices, but this does not necessarily translate to those employees accessing mobile learning. Secondly, connectivity and bandwidth issues within companies are also pretty much guided by the business demand. The bandwidth is there for business operations to continue. So we did find that we needed to hold back on training delivery, even if it was online, due to bandwidth constraints. So under technology, the employer readiness or level of maturity in terms of digital learning capability is varied, as described by the continuum that I illustrated earlier on. If I move on to the financial impact, firstly, let me just talk about the immediate impact around legal compliance costs. So businesses were required to comply with the COVID-19 regulations, and this involved purchasing physical infrastructure, updating the infrastructure, and making it safe and healthy. They also required to induct employees and to train employees in terms of keeping themselves and those around them safe. So there is an increase in legal compliance costs. Secondly, moving to remote working and therefore remote learning also had the impact of employers now having to fund data costs. which were obviously not initially anticipated where employees were office-based. Also, more demands were being placed on IT teams to support employees remotely. Thirdly, the social distancing requirements, particularly as it impacted skills development learning programs, requires the physical distancing requires then that either more classes needed to be delivered or bigger classes needed to be made available in order to deliver learning programs. And lastly, on the financial aspects, business operations were disrupted severely in certain instances, which led to reduced or to no income. And this then also had impacts in terms of the workforce and continued operations and business having to make some tough decisions. We saw in the media how businesses responded, business leaders, by taking salary cuts and in some instances drastic measures such as Section 189. As it relates to the people and talent aspects of the impact of COVID-19, remote working and also remote learning assumes that the home environment is enabled or amenable to remote working and learning. And we know that our socioeconomic reality means that this is not true for the most of South African, the working South African populations. So what this means is that motivation and maximizing productivity and even participation has been impacted in this context. Working remotely or learning remotely also requires a high degree of autonomy and self-regulation. And so this then requires employees and workers and learners to adjust quite rapidly during this lockdown period. Also, the demand for wellness services has increased due to the stress related to the pandemic, to just responding in terms of the health impacts, job losses, and then also declining incomes. When I talk about the downstream impact, here I'm really talking about the supply side of skills development. And the first point I want to make here is that public and private providers were impacted by cancelled or deferred classes. So we all talk now about the supervening impossibility where it was not possible, even though parties wanted to continue with learning, it wasn't physically possible. There was a loss of income to these providers and obviously a disruption to learning programs. Just today, the Financial Mail published quite an extensive article on how business schools have been impacted by COVID-19, just to illustrate this example. And then companies who are funding students at universities and colleges were also unable to progress with that funding due to the uncertain environment that we found ourselves in. So this also obviously affected learners. Learners have been left in limbo in most instances. They had to vacate the university residences, return home, and continue studies remotely where this was possible. So there are challenges that accompanies this. And in preparing for this webinar, I spoke to a colleague who runs a foundation and that supports students. And one of the adjustment strategies that they counsel students on was how, when they are faced with very challenging home conditions, one of the things that they needed to start doing was looking at how they would adapt their immediate circumstances to enable them to learn. So, for example, where it wasn't physically possible for them to study during the day, they would then recommend that the students sleep during the day and wake up in the early hours of the mornings when the household is quiet so that they could study. So these are just some of the examples of how different agencies and support systems had to rally around to try and support students. The challenging economic conditions where employers are downsizing, our economy is contracting, and jobs are being shed. We're also expecting an impact in terms of graduate unemployment, and that this could potentially grow in the short term. And as learners graduate, we will start seeing the impact in the new year. I want to move on to talk about the impacts of on broad-based Black economic empowerment as it relates to the scorecards that we as business the scorecards that we are audited on. So before I go into the details of that, I just want to very briefly touch on a couple of points around the implications. So the lockdown period was basically April till now in July. And when you look at the lockdown period, one would really have to consider the measured entity's financial year. So whether April to July falls squarely within that measured entity's financial year, or whether it is in fact spread across 2 financial years, and that will then have an impact. How and to what extent the industries were impacted by the various levels of lockdown? Obviously, we know that the tourism industry very badly impacted, and other industries such as, let's say, consulting, very advanced high-level skills, very much digital, adaptable, they could continue. And so, for example, as well, food retailers, their business continued during this lockdown period. But what is very important with regards to the BE scorecard is that it is the license to operate for businesses. It is the gateway to access greater commercial opportunities, and therefore it is a very important component for businesses to consider. The skills development element of the scorecard is a priority element. So companies must achieve a sub-minimum of 8 out of 20 points to avoid being discounted. So this obviously has huge implications for us if we look at what this means in terms of the 3 factors I want to talk about. Firstly, the skills levy debate. So the president announced a skills levy holiday of 4 months. This was very much welcomed. However, when it comes to the scorecard, it has been confirmed that this reduction in the skills levy does not mean the equivalent reduction in the skills and how the skills target is calculated. The skills development target will in fact be calculated on 12 months of skills levy. And this has huge implications for business. So if I think of an earlier example that I mentioned about the COVID compliance training, this training that I mentioned is not claimable under skills development spend, as it is classified as mandatory sectoral training and therefore excluded from the claim. Secondly, the changes that have been introduced late last year introduced a new category under skills development that encourage employers to get points for funding Black students at higher education institutions. So whilst this is not a new concept, and there are businesses who have been supporting students with scholarships and bursaries, there are industries where this has been disrupted due to the lockdown and the unavailability of university and students to progress those projects. Lastly, with regards to absorption, so there's 5 bonus points available for companies under absorption. So this is where companies, when they absorb learners who have completed their learning programs, they are then able to access those points. Now, one of the major changes has been the definition of absorption. So previously, absorption meant was based on learners eligible for placement, meaning those who have successfully completed their programs and who are eligible to be placed. That would then be what would be considered. However, now there is a stricter definition of absorption, which says that companies need to look at the learner headcount and look at that target versus the previous definition. And this has huge implications for business. And so there are concerns around what that will mean for the various business. I want to conclude my presentation by just taking you through two case studies. In preparing for this webinar, I spoke to a couple of colleagues, and I chose two companies that I wanted to share with you, just to also again illustrate the continuum from the traditional ways in which skills development to the very well adapted and what happened in these instances. So company A is a small employer. They employ 12 people. They're manufacturing production type of company versus the bigger company Z, let's call it company Z. They're a larger employer employing about 640 employees, and they are in the fashion, clothing, retail industry. They are based across South Africa, national footprint, whereas company A, the small employer, is only Gauteng based. So the types of skills for the small employer it's mainly artisans. So they have qualified artisans, and they have a very small support service. Versus the bigger retailer whose skills are around sales, operation in a business to customer environment. So what has COVID-19 meant for these companies? So for company A, they had minimal requirements around compliance. The physical workshop layout and space, the way it is at the moment was very much amenable to social distancing, so the operation could continue as the levels of lockdown decreased. So there was minimal impact. They had minimal spend as it pertains to COVID compliance. For company Z, they had extensive investment in physical infrastructure, because obviously their risks were higher in that they had customers, employees in a physical space, so they had to accommodate for that. When it comes to the skills development elements, company A, as a small employer, they even prior to lockdown, the skills requirement was very much ad hoc based. It was based on if a training need was identified, that would be addressed. So they were not really impacted from a COVID-19 point of view. For company Z, they had there was huge impact for them. They were very much on the traditional continuum. So they conducted their training face-to-face. They had to have employees travel, and that's how they conducted their training. So that came to a complete standstill under lockdown. And they had to very quickly try and respond and adapt their environment. So what they did was they purchased tablets and data for their store management. And what this allowed them to do was actually it actually improved their operations. So they are working in a much better, leaner kind of way. Their management has also now taken responsibility for training, mentoring, coaching their teams. It has led to better employee engagement, and it has improved their general operations quite well. So we see then that with these two examples, that the one employer pretty much remains in a traditional kind of way. The small employer, the large employer, very quickly adapted and moved from a very much on the traditional end to the right end of the continuum, starting to adapt their practices, but also improving their businesses. So in conclusion, Dr. Mashongwane, I just wanted to make a couple of points. So today we focused very much on the challenges that COVID-19 has presented to us. But I also just would like to very quickly talk about the opportunities that this has presented to us. So the speed of implementing digital solutions that I have demonstrated with the case study of the company Z. What this has also created for us is expanded access. So if we just look at this webinar that we are participating in today, so previously under traditional kind of delivery, we might have had less people being able to access that physical space to be part of this. But now with the digital platform, we are able to access more people. And also, if we just think about it, working from home has now opened up for us who are normally stuck in traffic between an hour and 2 hours. It has actually given us more time to be more productive and to actually dedicate that time to also upskilling ourselves. And lastly, Dr. Mashongwane, I just want to comment. So while we are facing many, many challenges, we are a nation of resilient South Africans. So we have this opportunity now to explore interventions through the social compacts that we have, through labor, business, government, as we are doing today. We need to explore what opportunities there are to work together closer. There's a lot of negative sentiments in the media sometimes, but I wish to focus on the positive aspects. What is it that we can do in the space, in the access, in the spaces that we are in, to really advance and create a better reality for our people? And I would like to take this opportunity, Dr. Mashongwane, just to thank Dr. Ashwani and Mr. Mvalo for this toolkit that was launched today. We really do appreciate it, and we will be interrogating it and looking at how this will help improve the quality of the programs that we deliver, and also the opportunities that this presents in terms of building the new skills of the future. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Melinette, for the presentation. Very useful information indeed. And I see that there are some engagements in the chat box for you. The first one, Claire says, can more information be provided regarding the triple BEE scoring, as we discussed this with our triple BEE rep? And where we were told it only adds 2 points, yet listening to Lynette, it has been explained very differently. Can you provide links for us to read up more on it? That's a request. And Candice is saying, how is business navigating alignment between supply of skills and demand for skills that are currently experience? And there is another question. Okay, I see there is a comment from Melissa. I'm not sure this question is directed to you from Floras. Okay, no, it's not necessarily directed to you. The other question here is emerging changes. What are emerging trends on skills needed for the entrepreneurs and small business? Maybe if you were to deal with these first 3 questions, we can then go for another round of questions. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mashongwane. With regards to the first question around the triple BE and the calculation of points, I'm not clear exactly what the person is asking, which element or which sub-element they are asking about. But the best, this is an unfolding landscape. So the best advice that I can give to this person is that they need to have a conversation with the agency that they are contracting to do their audit, because there are various kinds of interpretations, and I would also refer them to the BBBE Commission, who makes a pronouncement on interpretation. So the best way for them to get advice and guidance would be to contact the rating agency. Okay, that's on the first question. Dr. Mashangwani, could you just repeat the second question? I didn't quite get that one. The demand for skills.
Okay. Yes. I'm not sure whether you're talking to this one, or how is business navigating alignment between supply of skills and demand for skills that are currently experienced? That is a question from, yes.
Okay, so how we are navigating that at the moment is that I'm only going to respond in terms of our personal situation. So as I mentioned, this is a difficult situation right now, because in an environment where there's financial impact, where jobs are being shed, the business is pretty much in a survival mode. So it's trying to survive in a space where, with absolute minimum of skills to actually run that operation. So for example, skills of the future, the digital adaptation, some of these programs and projects are actually being pulled back a bit, because it's business, it's not business as usual, it's business trying to survive at this point in time. Okay. So with regards to emerging trends for entrepreneurs, and I've noticed on the chat box as well, there's been quite a lot of comments around this. I think it does open up opportunities as well for entrepreneurs with regards to responding to what the demands and the needs are. But again, pretty much even entrepreneurs that that companies are funding right now through the enterprise development, it's pretty much also in survival mode, trying to just get through this very difficult phase, and to keep a head above water, as it were, and then to move into a phase of then growing the business into the future. So there remains quite a bit of work to be done in the space.
Okay, let's then take the last two questions. Non-funder says the support for workplace training. What is your assessment in relation to supporting the small and medium enterprises has received from government, the banks and other stakeholders during this pandemic? And Khonzi says you have reflected on skills development challenges for small and large businesses. What is your view on inclusion of informal sector in South Africa? Those are the last two questions.
Thank you. So to Nomfundo's questions in terms of the response, I'm not going to comment on government's response. I want to go back to a comment I made earlier on. This is really our opportunity as different social partners to partner better, to get the funding to those who are in need. So we I've spoken about the social compact with business, labor, and government. This is our opportunity to really work closer together. This is not the time to have distance between us. We need to work closer together to get the funding that is available to those who are in dire need of that funding. So we need to work together a lot closer. With regards to a response for Khonso, yes, Khonso, you make a very valid point that the most vulnerable sector of our economy is in fact the informal sector, and there remains much to be done, Khonso, in all honesty, in terms of how we respond as business and support the informal sector. So I agree with you. This is an area that requires much more attention and much more focus. And again, it's a very, very vulnerable sector, and work needs to be done to get support to informal traders who are typically mostly women, and it requires attention for sure. I think the very nature of the businesses being informal creates a challenge for us in terms of governance, etc. But there is a way. We need to overcome this.
Thank you very much, and thanks also for the responses and comments in the chat box. I see Dr. Prinsloo also responding to Nomfundo and many others. Thank you very much. There is also just an update, a notice from Mail and Guardian that the part 3 of the NSA's webinar will be focusing on future of work on the 28th of August. And the good thing is we are going to be honored with the presence of our very own minister. I hope that we will then all join that last part of the webinar series where we discuss those matters. Thank you very much, Melinette, for the insights, and thank you indeed for a demonstration of the small employer as well as the big employer. It does give us a sense of what the employers have actually experienced during COVID-19 lockdown period. At this point, I am now going to be asking the chairperson of the NSA, Dr. Noila, to come back and to do the summary of the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to thank the moderator and our speakers, including co-presenters, who have been interacting with participants and responding to posed questions throughout the session. Furthermore, the Executive Officer of the National Skills Authority will pass a vote of thanks immediately after this brief summary of the proceedings. Today, we have received various presentations reflecting on the public, private to global perspectives. We were also graced by the launch of the ILO Toolkit for Quality Apprenticeships, Volume 2, which is designed for practitioners. Ladies and gentlemen, it is clear that all the presentations had a common thread straddling across, which is the catastrophic effect of COVID-19 in the private and public sectors alike. I've also been tracking the robust chat box interactions. You have indeed made very good use of the chat box platform. Despite the challenges presented by COVID-19, presenters also highlighted opportunities brought about by technological advancement. The first speaker, representing the public sector perspective, focused on the negative effects of COVID-19 on skills development and training in both the post-school education sector and the workplace. Mr. Mvalo began the presentation about outlining the current reality on skills development and training landscape, including disruption of post-school education programs due to COVID-19 pandemic. Secondly, Mr. Mvalo further reminded us of the effects that the pandemic is having on the labor market and the knock-on effect on youth unemployment. His presentation concluded by clearly outlining the importance of all role players to stay focused on the National Skills Development Plan and to continue with meaningful dialogue and collaborations in an effort to find sustainable and workable solutions through social compacts. Most importantly, Mr. Mvalo also launched the ILO Toolkit for Quality Apprenticeships. This toolkit has come at the right time to equip and guide all the practitioners in an effort to improve the quality of apprenticeship programs in South Africa. The second speaker, Dr. Agarwal, further elaborated on the ILO toolkit as an important apprenticeship guide that focuses on improving the quality of apprenticeship programs. He emphasized that an apprenticeship program is an important pillar of equipping the youth with the necessary skills they desperately need in our country, especially those not in employment, education, or training, who constitute the highest percentage of the unemployed. He further indicated that the toolkit provides a comprehensive guide to practitioners involved in design, planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of the apprenticeship programs. Furthermore, he emphasized how the tool can easily be adaptable to any local context, such as in South Africa. Lastly, he also outlined the process to be followed in the development of the program and tools to be utilized. The last speaker, Ms. Mento, reflected on how the business environment is being impacted and how organizations are adapting to the virtual digital environment. She highlighted the technological, financial, and people management impact as a result of the pandemic. She also indicated the downstream impact challenges experienced in the skills development system, especially in relation to the implementation of BEE scorecard. Lastly, I want to thank all the participants for your questions and inputs. Your invaluable inputs will further shape the post-COVID-19 dialogue on skills development within the post-school education and training sector in South Africa. Once again, on behalf of the National Skills Authority, let me express my appreciation for your participation and support. At this point, let me call upon the NSA Executive Officer, Dr. Mashongwane, to pass a vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Let me thank you for leading us in this session. Your very stern leadership. The good thing is you are quite well placed and very experienced in terms of leading the debates and activities of the NSA, given your background. I mean, I looked at your short CV. It's quite a very impressive one, from being a principal, a teacher, ultimately being where you are at, and also leading in various boards. So your knowledge, your experience comes very worthwhile for us in the NSA. So thank you very much for your leadership. Let me also, again, just reiterating what you said in terms of our three speakers, our DDG, Datem Valo, and Dr. Ashwani, Melinette, thank you very much for your insights. And for the very first time we had co-presenters, would have wished that their faces are also shown here, especially one of the faces has quite matured and changed from Western Cape. But then thanks for your inputs. You actually kept the chat box very active, very busy, very informative. Thank you very much, Dr. Prinsloo and Mr. Naidu. And to all NSA constituencies, stakeholders, right from the provinces, the PSDFs, all bodies, and the SAQUAM, the acting suits here, and all other affiliates to the NSA. Thank you very much for attending and ensuring that you attend this. And by the way, this is not just a talk show, because what we do in the office, we are going to be drawing up and developing reports on these webinars, and this is going to actually form part and parcel of the NSA discussions and debates. So this will be up for consideration in the NSA, so as they then advise the minister accordingly and also assist further development of the skill system. And there has been the notice, Mail and Guardian has actually been assisting us to say the next webinar, which is our last series, part 3, will be taking place on the 28th of August, almost 30 days from now. And the focus will then be on skills development and the future of learning during and post-COVID-19 pandemic. And in that case, we are going to then ensure that our very own Minister, Dr. Nzimande, is with us in the house, and we will also be ensuring that we're getting researchers and other role players. We want also to hear other voices. Unfortunately, we will not be able to accommodate all constituency voices, but surely there will be a representation from constituencies to say what are the issues, so they are able to then engage with the broad public of South Africa and beyond, and in particular engage the minister directly on these matters. So in that sense, let me then say thank you to all of you participants, each and every one of you who actually made this webinar a success today. And thanks also to the Malian Guardian and the Secretariat members who are actually making this a reality. Thank you very much. Have a blessed day. Thank you. This brings us to the end of the webinar. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Bye.